Well, we know that the pandemic is taking an emotional toll on people, but are we getting the proper help we need? Joining us today to talk about this is David Gabert, communications lead with the Canadian Mental Health Association, Alberta South Region. David, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Now, can you give us any stats on how we're doing when it comes to our mental health? To what degree is the COVID pandemic affecting us? And I would say probably a lot.
It is a lot. Actually, there was a study that was released just last week as part of CMHA's Mental Health Week that was done with the University of British Columbia, and they've done it in 3 rounds over the last year. And what we've seen in this third round of findings is that 40% of Canadians are reporting sort of a drop in their mental health or their mental wellness over the course of the pandemic, which is not shocking from what we're seeing here in Lethbridge or from people accessing crisis services or those sort of things. We know that prior to the pandemic, 1 in 5 Canadians struggled with mental illness in some way, shape, or form. But we also acknowledge that 5 in 5 Canadians, we all have mental health, just like we all have physical health that needs to be taken care of.
Yeah, that the statistics are staggering with 40%
Yes.
now since the pandemic. That's crazy. So what are some of the specific mental health issues that people are struggling with more as a result of this pandemic?
Well, that was one of the questions we asked in the study that was undertaken, and there was a lot of different responses, as you can imagine, because everyone's mental wellness journey is so unique and so personal to them. Some of the common things we see are isolation, not being able to talk to family and friends, not having the support networks that they normally would rely on. As well as things like depression and anxiety, fear of catching COVID, or those sort of things as well.
Yeah, I think some of us are feeling more lonely, depressed, and anxious than usual these days, of course. But how do we know if our mental state is actually at the point of needing that professional help?
It's very hard to tell that. That is a challenge for anyone accessing services, for anyone in their daily life. The best advice that we can give is if you're uncertain, reach out. In the same way that if you're uncertain if you need to go see a doctor, it's better to call 811. It's better to go see and book in with your family physician. If you're concerned about your mental health at all, reach out to some of the supports in the community. Maybe that's the distress line. Maybe it's community links. Maybe it's some of those free supports just to assess and sort of see where you're at and see if there is something that you can reach out or do for yourself.
Now, David, mental health seems to be a little bit more of a buzzword now, but is there still a stigma attached to it, or is it a little bit more in the forefront these days?
I think the idea and the conversation around mental health is very much at the forefront. I think that stigma really comes in on that personal level. So it's much harder for me as an individual to reach out for help than it is to talk about the fact that mental health is an issue in our society and something that we need to address, especially in the times of COVID. I think we see the stigma coming from walking through the door of a counselor or being seen or associated with being weak or being less able to handle the stresses of day-to-day life. Um, I think there's a lot of ways people can reach out without that fear, whether it's online, whether it's through a phone or a distress line or those sort of things. But I think the stigma is still very prevalent out there.
Yeah, so you think if someone is very depressed or anxious, they might be a little hesitant to let anyone know about it and go for that professional help, huh? Wow. So, what kind of feedback do you get from those who do actually go for help? And of course, you were saying there's other ways to do it now online. It kind of takes that stigma away, doesn't it?
It definitely mitigates it to a large extent. I think there's also this misnomer that if you go and get help, everything's going to instantly turn around, and it's going to be better. There's going to be, a light at the end of the tunnel, and definitely there is, but it takes work, just like any sort of medical issue that you have to work through or anything along those lines. It's not necessarily you'll go see a counselor once, you'll go see your doctor for mental health supports, and everything will be better. It's a journey, it's a process, and I think it's a process that 5 in 5 Canadians are on, especially in this time.
Wow. Now, does it make a real difference? Does it help their situation to seek counseling?
In a lot of ways, yes. And sometimes it's counseling, sometimes it's other supports that are out there in the community. So it can be everything from addressing, maybe it's a relationship issue, maybe it's a challenge or struggle paying rent or taxes. There's other things that we can do to take care of our mental health beyond just the counselors and psychiatrists, which are a key part and sometimes help, but may not be the whole fulsome solution to actually get to the root of the issue and have that positive mental well-being going forward.
Yeah, for sure. Now, how many people actually know where to go for help? Is there coverage available for those who can't pay for, say, like a psychologist, for example?
So there's a lot of places that people can reach out, and I think there are a lot of supports that are available at low or no cost, depending on what you're looking for. Especially for people who are struggling financially, there are subsidies that are available through the City of Lethbridge. I know Family Ties and Woods Homes have free counseling that's available here in Lethbridge. Um, so I think there are options available for those who want to reach out and find those supports. And if you're uncertain, it's a scary, daunting system to reach out to. You can always reach out to community links and they can help try and find supports for you so you're not navigating the system on your own.
Yeah, and speaking of which, I think you are one of those, aren't you?
Yes, so we actually run community links here at CMHA. So community links, we have some trained social workers. Normally when the library is open, they'll sit at a desk at the library for people to go in and just talk about what's going on and those sort of things. Right now they're available over the phone at 403-328-5465. And people can call and reach out and just explain what's going on, and they're there to help people navigate the social support system here in Lethbridge.
Okay, and do you have a website as well if people wanted to look you up?
Yes, it would be lethbridge.cmha.ca, pardon me.
Okay, great. Now, you were talking about getting connected with professionals, but sometimes it's even a good idea to just start talking to a friend, right? Or clergy, maybe even an HR manager at your workplace. Like just start with where you're at, right?
Yeah, I mean, we all as humans have those connections. We have those social support systems that we're connected to. And I oftentimes the leaders in those areas want to see us succeed. They want to see us be healthy, whether it's a pastor, whether it's a manager at work, whether it's a friend or a colleague, whoever that might be. If you feel safe, chat with them because chances are they may know supports, they may know resources in the community, and if not, at least you're not navigating it by yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you had mentioned some scary stats at the beginning of this interview with just the rates of mental illness going up, or mental health issues, rather, 40%, you said, since the COVID pandemic started. But do you know if the suicide rate has gone up as well during the pandemic?
I don't have any specific stats on the suicide rate. We're seeing more suicide that is being covered by the media. So we know that there have been those who have lost their lives to suicide over the course of the pandemic. Um, but I couldn't speak in any further detail to just what those rates look like, to be honest with you.
Right. Now, have we also seen an uptick in substance abuse in order to cope with loneliness or depression or unemployment?
That was one of the questions that was actually put out in the UBC study. And substance use, whether it's alcohol, whether it's illicit drugs, whatever it might be, has seen an uptick as just a way for people to try and cope with the changes and the stress or the added stress to day-to-day life for sure.
Now, speaking of stress, what are some good ways to just kind of reduce that? Obviously, we were talking about like just talking to friends, get some exercise. Any other ideas there?
Yeah, there's lots of little things that we can do, whether it's journaling, whether it's detailing, whether it's reading. Find those things that really speak to you. And if it's not working, try something new. Whether it's a book, a walk, a bike ride, whatever it might be. There's lots of different ways that ultimately we know what's going to relax us, what helps us at the end of the day to unwind and process what we're going through. And it's important to take that time for ourselves.
Definitely. And I think now that the weather is getting nicer, it should help a little bit.
Yes, very, very much so. I mean, Lethbridge has some amazing parks and the river valley in and of itself that are all amazing places to go, whether it's to go for a walk, a bike ride, relax, just go sightseeing, see what animals you can find, make a miniature scavenger hunt. I know Helen Schuler has some amazing resources out there for things to look for in the river valley. So there's lots of options.
That's great advice. Now, if you happen to notice that a friend or coworker has really been struggling with mental health issues, what are some ways that we can approach them to help them get some help?
I think the main thing is just asking if they're okay, and inviting them, and making yourself feel um, like you're a safe place or a safe person for them to chat with, a non-judgmental, not trying to tell them what to do, but just really being there to listen rather than give advice is usually the best thing that we can do as individuals.
Yeah, that's great advice, David. Any final thoughts or final advice to viewers who may be struggling with some kinds of these mental health issues?
Of course. If you're, I think my biggest advice would be, if you're uncertain, if you're struggling, if you are struggling, to reach out. We have many different programs here, um, and you can reach out online too. So I mean, if you're actively feeling like you're in crisis, the Distress Line of Southwestern Alberta is always available. The phone number for that is 403-327-7905. Community Links is also available if you're just curious about resources in the community and think you might be struggling in some ways. Their number is 403-328-5465. And there's lots of courses that you can take through our recovery college as well, just to help increase your resiliency and see what sort of skills you might want to brush up on. And you can check out their website at recoverycollegelethbridge.ca. And beyond that, connect with the resources that you have, connect with the people that you have, and check in with one another and see how you're doing out there.
Yeah, great advice. Thank you so much for being with us today, David. We really appreciate it.
Not a problem. My pleasure.
David Gabert is the communications lead with the Canadian Mental Health Association, Alberta South Region.